Our last presenter for tonight is Dr. Bill Witt. We put him last because always had excellent information to give us, and that can keep around. He'll go through this presentation. We'll have time for questions from Bill or for others. He's a retired weed science professor at the University of Kentucky, and we're so thankful that he's continuing to be very active in the field of weed control and speaking at our meetings. So, Bill, to you.
All right, thank you. Can you all hear me? Is that working? Okay. I think I only know of two people in here who were at the very first one of these. I was one of them, and my friend, where is she? Debbie Pruitt, wherever she is. We were at the first one of these. Anybody else at the first one? I'm just curious. You got to be getting old if you were. I don't think Linda was. Yeah. I know Linda. I've known her since she was in class, so I don't think she's that old. Any rate, to get on with this, this was a title they asked me to address, and I gave this exact same talk in 2014. But I did change slides because I've learned something since then. So how dry was it this year? If you, long-term average, 45.75 in Lexington, 45.29. So if you look at long-term data, we were about 0.3 of an inch less this year. And anybody who lives around here knows that we had a very dry period. So I'm somewhat of a history buff on everything. 1930 was the driest year ever recorded in Lexington. We've got data all the way back to 1895. So in my lifetime here, 87 and 88 were the two driest summers that I experienced. So what's the problem this year? If we had so much rain, why are we having this whole discussion? And I might add, this is much worse in terms of getting grasses established than 1987, or excuse me, in 2014. Much different. So, here's the blue is the up and down of rainfall in Lexington over the year of 2022. And anytime you look at long-term averages, everything tends to get flattened out, and you see the orange colored here. But what we're going to talk about particularly, we had this big rain in July, and then the next time we got above an inch, it took a while. So what really caused the problem, I think, had more to do with what happened. And this data is from Lexington, and if you're in the surrounding area, it mimics fairly closely, although there were a couple of rains in August. If you lived out where I do, and a couple other people in the room here, we didn't get that rain. So between August the 30th, we had 1.1 inch. The next time we had a 1.1 inch rain was December 14th. So everything that was going on between August, you just heard, we were wanting to be seeding grasses on the 1st of September. Well, by the time 1st of September rolled around, everything looked pretty good. But it drastically went down. So we went 124, between these two rainfall events, 124 days. 28 rainfall events, 10 of which were listed as a trace, which means that if you use your imagination, maybe you got something wet. And we averaged a little over 1/10 of an inch on every rainfall event. And that doesn't even settle the dust. And that's why we have such poor stands in many places. And so the challenge for all of you is, how are you going to manage those poor stands? You've heard Dr. Smith talk about different options in terms of starting over or trying to reseed or whatever. So to get at that, I want to just bring you back. I've shown this slide many times. We call these plants weeds. That's just because we don't like them. And these plants grow only where they're supposed to grow. They don't just pop up where we don't want them. Wherever they grow, that's what is a good environment for them. They germinate and emerge, they grow and reproduce, and produce seeds before human activity presents this. So the human activity we want to do on these weeds is either kill them or prevent seed production. Preventing seed production on our pasture weeds is almost impossible. I don't care how many times you mow your pasture, you're not going to stop seed production because they will adapt and be down below the cutting height. So, what do we do in horse pastures that impact this? I'd like to think we do a lot of things that make them hard to grow, but in reality, that doesn't always happen. So, here's, you've seen pictures like this before. Here's a very poor stand of things, a few thistles and weeds already coming in. Anytime you've got a bare spot in your pasture, whether it's like this or actually not so big, you can already see these weeds emerging last fall and coming in. All these, what we call the winter weeds, 99% of them germinate in October and November and early December. So they're out there now. I won't go into my prejudice against chain harrowing pastures. There's a need for them and a significant need for them. But be aware, when you go through with a chain harrow, you're knocking up little bare soil areas that are going to stay bare until the following spring when these grasses start to grow again. And so everywhere we have a bare spot, we have the potential for weed seeds to germinate and start to grow. There's a series of weeds that we have in Kentucky that grow well. And it doesn't matter whether they're wet, dry, or in between, they do pretty well. Buttercups, dandelion, musk thistle, common ragweed, and that's a horse nettle. We've talked about all of these. We see those frequently. I would like to take credit for getting rid of so many thistles, but actually I have really nothing to do with it other than happen to be here. We don't have near as many thistles now in this region as we did in 1975 by any stretch of the imagination. So what about the impact of a dry period? If you're in a good established pasture that's in good shape, impact is much less. Probably expect the same thing you saw over the last several years. Not going to be much difference. Observe pastures for perennial species encroaching. Horse nettle, ground cherries, dandelion, plantains, and docks. These come in over time in almost all our horse pastures because we just see them frequently. And there's not much you can do to stop that from coming in. Can we control this set of weeds with herbicides? Yes, we can. Highly effective, we can. Mowing does almost nothing to any of these because they're fairly low-growing plants. If you've got old pastures that are poor stands, are not in good shape, then we're going to see, again, whether we have a dry period or a normal period, we're going to see the same thing happening here. These fall germinating species, the dead nettle, chickweed, you can read a hemlock, plantains, they're out there now. The buttercups are out there now. And they've been there, all of these have been out here since last fall. The buttercups are more recent, but they're very thick and growing well now. In these areas that are open, these spring germinating species have an excellent areas for germination and probably will show up. The pigweed, common ragweed, yellow foxtail, crabgrasses, Johnson grass. All of these species right here germinate or start germination around 65 degrees soil temperature. When does that occur in Lexington? Any estimates? I won't say guesses, but estimates. April. sometime in April. If you look at weather stations, you can get soil temperature, and most of the time it's going to be at 2 inches deep. Is that useful data to you as a farm manager? Useless. You saw Dr. Smith had a great presentation of small seeded forages and how a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch is the optimum depth for those. That's where all these species right here are germinating in the top 1/2 inch of soil. Even the Johnson grass, we think of it being a large seed, it's not. They're all coming from seed at about that same depth and temperature. So you're almost as well. And the other thing, those bare spots that I showed, that soil temperature right there on the surface is going to be very close to air temperature. It won't be a degree or two different than the air temperature. So that gives you we're going to spray post-emergent herbicides after the weeds are up. We know when to start looking for them. And if we're going to use a soil-applied herbicide that has to be on before they germinate, then we're looking somewhere in the first week of April, as late as you want to go. And we've got some data that supports that in pastures. Perennials, they're probably going to increase too. They always do. Our natives, such as nimblewheel, ground cherry, Carolina horse nettle, likely will increase. And again, they have all these have deep root systems, or extensive root system, not necessarily so deep in the soil, but highly extensive, and they will do well. So let's get on to what we field seeded in the fall of 22. How many people in here have such things as that? A few of you, I'm assuming. It's okay to admit it. My neighbors have a lot of this problem. Like I pointed out, we were very dry for about 100 days. We get poor uneven stands. Somewhere between 10 and 75% of the areas without a forage grass. In many of these, that's how poor the stands were. So which one would you rather? If you've got a 75% coverage of forage grasses right now, you're probably going to say, I'll live with that. But those of you that are 10 to 50, that's a different issue. And it's been covered by Ray quite well. You can expect a heavy infestation already of dead nettle, chickweed, dandelions, plantains, and buttercups are out there right now. They're just everywhere. The potential for germination, heavy infestation of foxtail, crabgrass, ragweed, pigweed, nimblewheel, Johnson grass, etc. is great. Anytime you've got these open areas, they do well. And so just expect that. So the challenge comes up then, what can we do? Is there anything we can do from a management standpoint to control this group of plants? Well, let's take some of them. I don't want to admit defeat on anything, but this is about quit me after 25 years of trying. Nimblewheel. 2 days ago, I took these pictures. Both on our property, I'm sorry to say. See a lot of old nimblewheel from last year still hanging out there. Pull this plant up, the soil surface is about right here, and I don't know if you can see that very well, but this is all green, new plant material right here, right now. And so you know it's going to be there. It's you can see the old last year's stolen down here. You can see the newer ones that were still hanging in there. But this is one that's out there, and it is the most difficult weed to kill in our pastures in this region, because we don't have anything that will selectively kill it out of our forage grasses. This one of those, you can start over, but if you get 6 to 8 years of control with no nimblewheel after you just go totally start new, feel lucky. Well, what about these established pastures in good shape? What can we do? Well, like I said, we just continue with your usual management tactics. If they're working for you, don't change. We talked about these. Whoops, back up one. I talked about this already. The grasses and broadleaves are going to increase in these as a result of some of these poor shaped pastures. If you have these weeds, you can see them all there. They're very standard, not uncommon to see all of these in a horse pasture or beef pasture either, for that matter. There's herbicides you can use. Grazon next, and Dorcor will kill all of these fairly well. I mean, if you're looking at 90% control. If you're using Weedmaster or 2,4-D, it's going to be, you can kill dandelion control will be fair. Curly dock will be very poor generally with just 2,4-D. The plantains, if they're not too big, will be very well controlled with these. Go to whoever your person is you want advice from, your dealer or applicator. They can tell you which ones they prefer and what to use and when to use it. But generally, I think to say we get 5 degrees of warm weather, 6. These are all post-emergent herbicides. If you get 5 days of 60 to 70 degree weather, spray. Because in April, early March, late February and March is, March 15th is not that far away, and it still gets cool here in March. It can be cool. We're not going to be into the 80s for any length of time most of the time. So, what is the growth stage newly established in 2022? If those are plants you have out there, you've got grasses out there now about this tall or this tall, how are you going to determine what to do with them? Because if you look on herbicide labels, they say apply to established grasses only. They don't tell you what an established grass is very well. And you need to be, if you're going to put a herbicide out here on these few grasses you've got, you want to make sure you're not going to kill them with the treatment you're putting out for weed control. So what is an established grass plant? The Weed-On is a 2,4-D formulation, an ester, well established, what it says for pastures, but if you're putting it on a grass seed fields, it says 5-leaf stage. How big is a 5-leaf orchard grass or 5-leaf bluegrass? About like that. They're not very, 5-leaf is much bigger. So that's one of those things that makes it tough on decide what to use. The Grazon next says well established with good secondary root system and shows good vigor. Well, some of these little grasses would be hard pressed to show much vigor than what they've been through since germination, dry weather, then wintertime. So, Weedmaster says just well established. So when y'all get ready to go out there and pull the trigger to do something, how are you going to know if it's well established or not? No great scientific data out here to tell you what that is, unfortunately. Now, one of my mentors at UK 30 years ago, well, closer to 40 years ago now, his theory on how to establish, if a grass is established and safe for 2,4-D. You got to remember, 40 years ago, all we had was 2,4-D for grass control in pastures. He says if you can grab hold of the top of that plant and just pull it, and it stays in, you don't pull the grass out by the roots, it's established. Now, that's a pretty simplistic way of doing things, but not all bad. But I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable doing that with this product particularly. But anyway, that is the dilemma. And I wish I had this great silver bullet to tell you what to do, why it would work, and if it would work. So the challenge is for you people that have horse pastures, big or small, doesn't make much difference. You can find easily Even and I'm not a great weed ID person, I can find 20 to 25 weeds in every pasture. Literally. We're in a transition zone, greatest place in the world to do weed work. Southern end of the northern zone, northern end of the southern zone. We've got them all. There's no one herbicide or practice that's going to control all your weeds. It will not happen. Overgrazing is one of the greatest contributors to weed populations. I see that, we see that all the time. And again, it doesn't make much difference what size you're in. These things, makes this great challenge for you. So, I'm ready for questions if y'all have any. Any specific thing.
What about spraying in a warm spell in the next week or two and then sitting in a month? That's something I can do, or a product I can use?
I understand the question. What about spraying this week or the next week? It's going to be fairly warm, and then wait about a month to reseed, if I understood. Okay. That is doable, but you need to be real cautious on what herbicides. 2,4-D is one. If you have some weeds you can control, 2,4-D will control most of the winter weed complex that's out there now. It'll do very well. And so that one will not last in the soil over a couple of weeks in Kentucky, and many times less than a week. 2 weeks and a half inch of rain, and you can't find 2,4-D in our area. It just goes away in a hurry. And then seed afterward. We have done a lot of work on research on Razon and Duracor, a little less. But most of the time we're spraying in early summer and in seeding in September. And we've got by with that with no problem. Now, I don't know, I would be a little hesitant to use that material and reseed in a month this time of year. The likelihood of injury is certainly there. Other questions somewhere? The question was, make sure I understand that. If you've got grass growing, it's a good stand of grass. What's the height, the recommended height of mowing that grass?
I think it's 6 inches. Good height for bigger grass. Making sure that you don't go with them. So typically just maintenance type of be about 6 inches.
Yes, sir. Two 4D, again, 2 to 3 weeks, it's gone. Doesn't matter. Aminopyrrolid says not to do it at all on their label. Okay. We have researched, out at the Spindletop research site, where we've gotten by 1 month. We sprayed it 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, and day of planting. And we've gotten by with 2 months with never any damage, and only once did we ever get damage at 1 month. But red and white clover. The safer clearly would be later. We have that data, but it's not in recommendations anywhere from their label or our recommendation. Yes. So this is, okay. So you said now you've seeded already last year, but last fall, in the fall. And then the weeds went crazy. Yeah. They didn't get bothered by that. Well, you have two options. We can do nothing and see what happens. You have three options. You can spray 2,4-D out there and hope that you get control and don't kill all the little grass that's under there. Or you can just start over and kill it all and reseed. I don't know that you can even find granular herbicides anymore. They're very difficult to come by on large scale. You can do it in your yard, but 2,4-D impregnated on fertilizer for yards is very common. 2,4-D be the only thing, and it's the only thing you need right now. It'll control practically all the weeds that are out there right now. But it's dicey. I won't say it's not. I'm sorry, I can't hear very well. What will control buttercups? 2,4-D? Yes. And practically every pasture herbicide we have will control 2,4-D. I mean, it's controlled buttercups. You just got to spray something. Yes, sir.
Cleaning out a fence, I think, years. I'm going to place something on it so it does.
Well, the best thing, if you live in a different state, there's a really great, can't use it in ours. There's a material called Remedy Ultra, and the active ingredient in that name is triclopyr. You can get triclopyr at many places that doesn't have the Corteva label, the Corteva brand name. But it is about as good on brush as anything we have in the state.
Still need to wait till about 5 days.
Well, you need to wait for that product. You got to wait. You got a lot of leaves, so it's got to be fully leaved. Now, if you're cutting it down right now, then there's two things. The best one is Tordine RTU. It's a ready to use. It's a green material. You put it right around the stump. You don't have to do the whole stump, just in the cambium layer around the edge. Although it's much easier to do the whole thing. From experienced, you'll learn that real quick. That's one, and it's ready to use right out of the jug. The other one is glyphosate or Roundup, a 50% solution. 1 part Roundup, 1 part water. Immediately. They're equal if you treat both of them within 5 minutes of cutting them. Wait longer than 4 to 5 minutes, then use Tordine RTU. Comes in quart containers. Yes, sir. Ma'am, I'm sorry. How long after you spray can animals? If everything we've talked about today, don't even have to take them out of the pasture. However, I strongly suggest you do. Animals sometimes run in through fences when they get spooked, but they don't have to come out of there. But I've seen a lot of other issues that cause problems. But yes, sir. Is poison hemlock getting worse in the state? My colleague J.D. Green and I, who wrote most of these weed control pubs you have, he thinks it is. I'm not convinced, but clearly it hasn't gotten any less. That's for sure. It is everywhere, and the only saving grace about poison hemlock is that animals don't eat it. If they did, we wouldn't grow hardly any state because it's everywhere.
That's from the spring.
Yeah, 2,4-D. Again, the best time to spray poison hemlock, first day of November. It's already up. And remember, is it germinates in the fall, grows the next year as a rosette, and the second year it puts up a flower stalk. So when you're out here spraying hemlock, you're spraying some plants that are not even 6 months old right now, that are 18 months old. So it doesn't make any difference. A 2,4-D will take it out. Other questions, comments? Yes, sir. I'm to ignore that question. Gotta go. So, controlling Johnson grass in pastures. Was it? Well, let's do fence rows. Say it's about as good as anything. If it's a non-crop, true non-crop, there are other products that you can use that are equally good as glyphosate, but they do not kill all your grass. But they will kill only Johnson grass. They won't control anything else. That's the beauty part of glyphosate. In pastures, you've got glyphosate as a spot treatment, either by hand or in a rope wick, and you can spot spray with Plateau. Plateau, 2 feet down will take it out, but spot spray, not broadcasting. You got to spot spray to get that good of control with Plateau. And I forget the exact amount. They tell, but it's in the label what the percent is on that. The advantage of using Plateau for spot spraying is it doesn't kill all your grass. If you use the glyphosate, it's going to kill the Johnson grass and any other grass it touches. Any other questions, comments? Yes. Foxtail? Well, yellow foxtail is the one I assume you speak of, since I know you have it on your farm. And all your neighbors do too. There's 2 products that are out there. Pre-emergence, Prowl H2O, but needs to go on around, normally I would say the 1st of April, certainly the first, no later than the 15th of April. And we've had good success with that. If you put it on the last 2 weeks of April, the 1st of May, control plummets because it's already germinated. A material called Facet is very good post-emergence foxtail control, but it's got to be 2 inches or less. And it's critical. If it's 4 inches, don't go spend your $30 an acre. You won't kill it. Plateau at 10 ounces or whatever, it's labeled for less than that for foxtail control. I think it's around 6 or 8 ounces, but don't look on the label to make sure. It actually is pretty good, again, on 2 to 3 inch foxtail. Now, that's easy to find, a 2 to 3 inch foxtail in hay fields. Cut it off, foxtail hadn't germinated, you can see it, get at it. I have tried to find 1 inch foxtail in pastures. It is difficult. You got to be on your hands and knees and looking closely. You can't see it if you're just walking through a field. You won't get it. It's that difficult to see. And in a hay field, when you spray for foxtail, it's as tall as the grass, so you get 100% coverage. In a pasture that you're mowing down, if you've got 1 inch foxtail, and we just heard that no less than 4 inches for a good pasture, and mostly higher than that, you can't get your spray on it for post-emergence. And so if you're going to invest in that, the Prowl H2O is the only thing that you have a really good shot at. And I don't remember the exact rate on Prowl H2O. It's a couple of quarts, I think. Use the maximum rate of the H2O.
We'll go back to the second application this summer.
Second application midsummer, there is a total rate level that you can use on that rate. I don't remember what, I'd have to look that up. But you can do 2 treatments, but I don't think it's 2 plus 2. I think it's less than that.
And I'm saying that that's after 2 to 3 months. That application today was going to be flush, late summer. But if you went with the July application of Trial H2O, then you're not going to be seeding new grasses, or you shouldn't seed new grasses into that stand, because Trial H2O is going to keep them everything. So the 2 applications is that's all you're trying to do. You're going to do seeding along your district application screen and just look at it.
Good questions. Euonymus. I thought you'd learned how to get rid of that. One of my neighbors, we have all fought euonymus a lot. And it is, you know what I'm talking about? It's got a lot of you names. What's the other common name of that thing? What? Winter creeper. Thank you. It's one of the few plants that I know that grows equally well in full sun and full shade. If it's in where you can spray glyphosate, it's not bad. A couple of applications in September. August and September is our best results. On the other hand, the Remedy Ultra, the triclopyr, is about as good as anything for spraying it on the leaves out in open areas. Along the edges of fences and edges of fields, we see it all the time. I've about taken it out of our little 20-acre fence rows by multiple year sprayings of triclopyr, but it's not a one-time effect. Do what? It will do all broadleaf plants, trees, and other weeds. But generally, if you just get where you can, well, it tends to grow in spots more than anything else. So it's not like you're going to have to broadcast the whole field. Oh, now he's getting really picky here. Woody plants or things that are real woody vines, I think the 4E, the ester formulation, is better. You get more of the esters in the plant. Not kerosene, that's not labeled, that's illegal. Diesel and kerosene are not in my vocabulary. Any of these, well, depends. If you're just spraying the plant, the whole tree or the whole plant, then a good crop oil concentrate or even a surfactant. Now, if you're doing stem treatments, then go get basil oil. That's hard to come by, but it's worth every penny to treat the woody part. Yes, yes, Debbie. What about Remedy Ultra? Yes. I don't have many crossbow or ester formulations of triclopyr and 2,4-D. Remedy Ultra is just triclopyr. And I've seen too much damage with ester volatility from crossbow on neighboring plants. So I don't recommend crossbow ever on a horse farm. There's too much damage for too many times. Well, cut stump, if I'm going to use that, I would go get, there's a ready-to-use product that has triclopyr in it. Can't think of the name of it, but that's what I would use. But again, for cut stumps, I don't think anything's better than a Tordon RTU. Close to being equal, but not better. Okay.
Prices just get built.
Yeah. Thank you.
Philadelphia,